Rudy, 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 Rudy. Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Up today, a preview and a game-by-game prediction for the 2024 Notre Dame Fighting Irish college football team. We're going to talk about last year just a little bit, kind of wrap it up. Look forward to this coming season. Who did they lose off last year's team? Who did they bring in? Some key coaching changes there. Take a look at their recruiting classes, transfer portal additions, things like that. Take a look at the offense and the defense. What stands out as some potential strong points? Are there any potential weaknesses on either side of the ball? And then we're going to throw the schedule up on the screen, go through it game by game, and I'm going to try to give you a winner and a loser for every single week. And we'll see how I can do. Just for fun, I put a poll up on one of my live streams the other day. Will Notre Dame make the playoffs? Yes or no? You know, we got a 12-team playoff now. So, it's going to be easier, or I don't know about it. Maybe easier is not the right word, although I think it's going to be easier. But even if you disagree, more teams are going to have access to the playoffs every single year. Now, Notre Dame has made the playoffs twice during the 4-team playoff era. Of course, they lost both times. Notre Dame sort of famously hasn't won a major postseason game since like 1991. They've lost like 11 straight major postseason games. I'm talking BCS games, national championship games, pre-playoff, 2 playoff games, multiple New Year's 6 games, and the only conference title game they've ever played in during 2020, the COVID season, when they were a full-fledged member of the ACC and got humiliated in the ACC title game. So they've lost 11 or 12 major postseason games in a row, but they did make the playoffs twice. But, it's going to be a lot easier for Notre Dame and a lot of other teams to get in now that we have a 12-team playoff. And if you go back and you start looking at a lot of the final rankings, or at least the final playoff rankings that come out after Conference Championship Saturday, Conference Championship Saturday is something that has nothing to do with Notre Dame, by the way, since they're still refused to join a conference. You'll see that Notre Dame falls in the top 12 a lot of years. Notre Dame would have made a 12-team playoff more years than not over the last decade or so. So I was a little bit surprised when I put this poll up that 62% of the audience did not think Notre Dame would make the playoffs in 2024. Now, I had sort of my own thoughts about Notre Dame heading into the season before I sat down to do this video. And of course, after looking into some things and doing some research today, my vote would be that Notre Dame probably does make the college football playoff, or at least they've got a really good chance to make it. And when we put the schedule up on the screen, I think you're going to see why. But they only have 4 true road games. Now, the Notre Dame fan will tell you, yeah, but we have 2 neutral site games. It's against service academies. It's against Army and Navy. Notre Dame's got 4 true road games. That's it. On top of that, and Notre Dame fans can get mad about this part of the video if they want to, this schedule is pathetic. 12-game regular schedule, same as everybody else. Notre Dame only plays 8 Power 5 opponents. That's it. 8. Nobody in the country plays less power. Well, I guess Power 4 is the term now that the Pac-12 is gone. No team in the country, no Power 4 team in the country plays less Power 4 opponents than Notre Dame. They only play 8. 4 of their games are against Group of 5 and Service Academy schools. That's on top of the fact that they avoid a potential landmine in a 13th game, a conference championship game, by, as mentioned before, still being scared to actually join one. It's an embarrassing schedule. It just is. Now, it is true that the SEC and the ACC only play 8 conference game schedules, and Notre Dame is playing 8 Power 4 opponents. But most teams, in fact, almost all SEC and ACC teams, play a non-con Power 4 opponent. Some teams like Georgia play 2. So Georgia plays one of the toughest conference schedules in the country. Then on top of that, they play 2 additional Power 5 opponents, Power 4 opponents. Notre Dame plays a couple of service academies, Northern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, and then 8 random Power 4 opponents. And that's it. Juggernauts like Georgia Tech, Virginia, Stanford, Purdue. Notre Dame better make the playoffs. If you can't make the playoffs with this schedule, you got big problems. Let's talk about Notre Dame. As mentioned, 9-3 last year, 10-3 after a bowl win, and I believe the Tiger Sun Bowl over Oregon State. Their 3 losses in the regular season came to Ohio State, Louisville, and Clemson. Ohio State and Louisville were pretty good teams. That Clemson loss is hard to explain. They were not a good team. In fact, last year was Clemson's worst year in over a decade. They were 8-4 in the regular season, a blowout loss to Duke. You'd probably like to have that one back if you're the Notre Dame man. Big improvement last year 2 in Marcus Freeman versus what we saw from him the first year. Now, in terms of wins, it's just a 1-game improvement, right? They were 8-4 in the regular season in his first year and 9-3 in the second year. So you say, well, that's just a 1-game improvement. They lost to Stanford and Marshall his first year at Notre Dame. Just the worst Stanford team in my lifetime. And Marshall, they started 0-2. It was just not a good look for Marcus Freeman year one. So even though the overall record is only improved by one game, Notre Dame was clearly a much better team in year two than they were in year one. They gave Ohio State everything they could handle in that loss there early in the year. One of the best games of the season, goal line stand type of deal that came down to. And a lot of people, myself included, expect Notre Dame to take an additional step forward in Marcus Freeman's third year. They've made some key changes to try to make that happen, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. Returning production. How much of last year's Notre Dame is back on the team this year? Well, they're 74th in the country in terms of returning production. They returned 61% of their offense and 60% of their defense. One of the best defenses in the country last year that nobody really talks about. I'm going to talk about it in a minute. I think it's going to be one of the best defenses again this year. Recruiting wise, how have they done? There's been a lot made by Notre Dame fans in particular about the recruiting going on now under Marcus Freeman versus the recruiting going on prior under Brian Kelly. And while the overall recruiting classes don't reflect that much of a difference in terms of what those recruiting classes were ranked, I do think the current administration of Marcus Freeman is doing a better job of spreading that recruiting out over multiple positions, specifically some of the skill position recruits that they're picking up, namely the wide receiver position and, of course, the running back position. That was something where Brian Kelly struggled at. Rarely did he have a game-changing quarterback. Rarely did he have a wide receiver that really scared anybody at Notre Dame under Brian Kelly. So, like I said, you look at their recruiting classes over the last 4 years, 2 of which are Marcus Freeman classes, 2 of which are Brian Kelly classes. The overall ranking doesn't vary a whole lot, 9th, 12th, 7th, and 9th. The recruits are a little bit more spread out, at least in my opinion, under the current coach, Marcus Freeman, than they were under Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly had a lot of tight ends, a lot of offensive linemen, defensive linemen, but really lacked in the skill positions. And I think Marcus Freeman is slowly starting to make some of that up in terms of the recruiting. When you look at the transfer portal, they brought in 9 players through the transfer portal this year. That's the most they've ever brought in. Last year was 7. The year before that was 4. 42nd ranked transfer class this year, 39th the year before. Transfer rankings can be kind of tricky, right? Because you got somebody like Colorado who goes out and signs 50 transfers. They're going to be ranked really high on the transfer team ranking list, right? Notre Dame bringing in a team like Notre Dame who recruits in the top 10 and then brings in 7, 8, 9 transfers to fill in gaps. To me, that's a much better way to approach football than what Colorado's doing. And I think if Notre Dame and Colorado were to actually play a game, you would see that bear out because Notre Dame would beat the absolute soul and will to live out of those deadbeats. But anyway, I digress. This is not a Prime video. Although I'd be happy to make one for you if you want me to. Let me know down below. When I think about Notre Dame heading into the season, a few things come to mind right away before I even looked anything up today. Number one, Sam Hartman gone, Riley Leonard in. I don't know if this is something Marcus Freeman is going to continue to do year after year, but it's something we've seen him do so far early in his career as head coach at Notre Dame. He brought Sam Hartman in as a transfer quarterback last year, one and done, and now he's bringing Riley Leonard in this year. Now, it never really... Sam Hartman didn't live up to the hype last year, in my opinion. Now, Notre Dame was a good team, but I didn't see out of Sam Hartman kind of what I thought maybe we would see out of Sam. And maybe the Notre Dame fans disagree with me. I don't know. I wasn't overly impressed last year with Sam Hartman, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Riley Leonard, I absolutely loved watching him play last year at Duke. He reminds me a lot of like Max Duggan at TCU a couple of years ago, or Cam Rising, or even a little bit of Michael Penix. Now, he doesn't have the arm of Michael Penix. I think Michael Penix has a much better arm, but those are just... I don't even know if I should put Michael Penix in this category, but like specifically Max Duggan and Cam Rising, like no one looks at them and says, wow, their talent level is through the roof. You know, their potential is out of this world. No. But for whatever reason, those guys just tend to make plays like when their teams need it the most. And Riley, when you watch Riley Leonard at Duke last year, that's what he did. You watch him in that Clemson game in week 1, even in the Florida State game before he got hurt. Week after week, it just seemed like every time Duke needed to play, Riley Leonard was making it. Of course, then the ankle injury, and that sort of derailed his season and Duke's. But he's at Notre Dame now. We'll talk more about him in a second. a brand new offensive coordinator in at Notre Dame who comes from LSU. And while LSU wasn't a great team last year, they had a Heisman winning quarterback, put up a ton of numbers offensively, and ran one of the best offenses in all of college football. And now that offensive coordinator who was in charge of that down there in Baton Rouge, Mike Denbrook, I believe is his name, he is the offensive coordinator now at Notre Dame. Defense. Notre Dame had a really good defense last year, and I feel like not a lot of people talked about it, but Notre Dame had a really good defense. Can it get better in 2024? I think even if they maintain that level and maybe the offense gets a little bit better, Notre Dame could be a playoff team, but that defense could potentially get even better. And then the offensive line is probably the one unit on Notre Dame's team that I have the most question marks about. Now, they have consistently fielded top-end offensive linemen going back a long, long time, even under Brian Kelly. So there's no reason to think that Notre Dame's offensive line will be bad in 2024, but they do have to replace 3 starters, including one of the best offensive linemen in the country, Joe Alt, if I remember his name right. And so anytime you have 2 or 3 new starters along that offensive line, it's not an indication that the line will be bad, but I think it is an indication that, okay, maybe this is something we need to keep an eye on, maybe something I've got some question marks about until I see them play a few times. I think that's a fair assessment of Notre Dame's offensive line. That's sort of my thought process about Notre Dame before I sat down today and started looking into some things. Now, let's talk about offense and defense, and then we'll put the schedule up. Talked about Riley Leonard. How healthy is he going to be? That's obviously, if you're going to name like one key to Notre Dame's season, it's probably the health of Riley Leonard. He didn't participate in the spring game, so we haven't really got to see a whole lot of him in terms of running the Notre Dame offense. In fact, we haven't got to see any of it all outside of, a few practice clips here and there that surface. But rehabbing that ankle injury that he suffered last year, how close to 100% can he be by the time the season starts, and can they keep him healthy? And will he be able to do the things coming off of this ankle injury that he did prior to that ankle injury at Duke, which is really what elevated him from kind of an average QB to one of the most exciting quarterbacks in all of college football, which is his ability to run around, extend plays, make defenders miss, that kind of thing. Are we going to see sort of the original version of Riley Leonard, or is it going to be a little bit scaled back post-injury? There's no way to know. No one knows. You don't know. You're a Notre Dame fan. You don't know. Nobody knows. We didn't get to see it at all during the spring, so we'll see. But if he's healthy, given what he's got to work with at Notre Dame, which, let's face it, he's going to have way more talent around him at Notre Dame than he ever had at Duke. Shout out to Duke. He had a great year last year. Mike Elko got himself a big raise. He's the head man at Texas A&M now. He's going to have way more talent at Notre Dame than what he had at Duke. So what can he do with that talent? We'll find out. Running backs, they lose Estime. I really liked Estime last year. I feel like that was probably the Notre Dame player I talked the most about last year was their running back Estime. He's gone. But the other 2 are back, Jeremiah Love and, again, look, people, every video I make, people go, you pronounce these people's names wrong. I don't name these. Some of these people, this guy's not, his name, Jadarian or whatever. Jadarian Price, whatever his name is. They're good too. Now, they were sort of, 1B and 1C, in my opinion, last year behind Estime. But that doesn't mean they can't be as good or better than Estime this year now that they're going to get, a bigger bulk of the carries. I really like them at running back. Again, a lot of the running back situation and how productive they are will come down to that offensive line that we talked about earlier. Tight end, they've got one of the best in the country. He was one of the best in the country last year. Now that Brock Bowers doesn't play college football anymore, Mitchell Evans might be the best tight end in all of college football. He's back. At wide receiver, they return 3 they returned several wide receivers, but 3 in particular that I liked last year. Primarily Greathouse. He's probably got the most, Notre Dame fans will always correct me if I'm wrong. In my opinion, Greathouse has the highest ceiling of these wide receivers. Now, the Notre Dame fans are going to tell me, well, this guy's better or that guy's better. Take it for what it's worth. If I could pluck one receiver off of Notre Dame to put on my favorite team, I would take Greathouse. But Faison is good and Thomas are good too. They also brought in 2 transfers that are probably going to get a lot of playing time at a wide receiver position. Probably rotate 5 wide receivers in and out of the game, depending on the situation. And then we talked about the offensive line already having to replace 3 starters. I think that's the biggest question mark about this Notre Dame team outside of the health of Riley Leonard is how well can this offensive line gel with 3 new starters? How well can they play in 2024? Let's look at the defense. one of the best defenses in college football last year. Like I told you, I feel like nobody talked about it. I looked some of these things up here. They were top 10 in scoring. They were top 10 in total defense. They were top 10 in yards allowed per play. I feel like everybody watched the Notre Dame-Ohio State game, saw Notre Dame lose at the very end, by the way, and then just tuned out Notre Dame the rest of the year. I watched the Duke game. I watched the Clemson game. I watched the Louisville game. I watched several Notre Dame games last year. They were a good team. That defense was really good. 5 starters return to that defense. So they've got a lot of replace there. But like any team that recruits in the top 20, Notre Dame doesn't just play the same 11 defensive players from beginning to end in a game. You rotate defensive linemen and linebackers. You put nickels and dimes in at the cornerback position that are your third, fourth, and fifth options at cornerback that now maybe this year will be your first, second, or third option. So even though they only technically have 5 starters returning, they have a ton of players returning with experience, meaningful experience, game time experience on the defensive side of the ball. The best of the bunch, probably All-American Xavier Watts, the safety that they have back there, and him and that cornerback might be the best safety. Well, they're really, really good. They're really, really good. What's his name? Howard? Howard Cross. That's the defensive tackle. Is it Benjamin Morrison? I think it's Benjamin Morrison is the corner that I'm thinking of. Him and Xavier Watts are 2 of the best secondary players in the country. Now, I've got some questions about the other corner. We'll see which way they decide to go there, but they have got talent and superstar potential on the defensive line with Howard Cross and in the secondary, particularly with Xavier Watts, but with Benjamin Morrison too. Now, they got to replace a couple of starters at linebacker, and I feel like they probably need a little bit of help on the edge, whether you're talking about rushing the quarterback or setting the edge against the run. They need one of those outside guys to kind of step up. But I think Notre Dame's defense is going to be really, really good again in 2024. All right, here's their schedule for this season. We're going to go through it game by game, and I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single week. All right, talked about the schedule a little bit at the beginning here. No conference versus non-conference to worry about because, of course, Notre Dame's not in a conference. They play 8, what we now call Power 4, right? They have 8 Power 4 opponents, and then they have 4 sort of lower-level schools. You've got Northern Illinois in week 2, Miami of Ohio in week 4, and then in the back half of the season, you've got neutral site games against 2 service academies, Navy and Army. The schedule is what it is. It's not a great schedule, and for this reason, Notre Dame, in my opinion, probably needs to go 11-1 in order to make the college football playoffs. I do think there will be some 10-2 teams that get into the playoffs. Obviously, we've got 12 spots to fill, but if Notre Dame goes 10-2, that means they're only going to have 6 Power 4 wins. That's it. That's not a lot. They only play 8 Power 4 opponents. So if they are 10-2, 10 wins, right? Only 8 Power 4 opponents. That means 6 Power 4 wins if they go 10-2. I think Notre Dame probably needs to go 11-1 to make the college football playoff. I just don't think they have the schedule to support getting in at 10-2. Now, I could be wrong. We've never seen how the committee is going to approach the selection process for the 12-team playoffs. Just my guess based on this schedule, they probably need to go 11-1. I see a few games right away that I don't even have to think about. It's just automatic. Northern Illinois, win. On the road at Purdue, one of the worst Big Ten teams on the planet, win. Miami of Ohio, a win. Stanford, one of the worst now ACC teams on the planet, that's a win. Navy, come on, a service academy, that's a win. No disrespect to Navy or Army, both of those are wins. And then Virginia, again, if it weren't for Stanford, Virginia would be the worst ACC team, and they still might be the worst. You probably play the 2 worst ACC teams in Virginia and Stanford. Your road games are at Purdue, at Georgia Tech, and at Southern Cal and at Texas A&M. Now, I'll give you Southern Cal and Texas A&M. Those are quality opponents. But you really got 2 road games to worry about. Anyway, so those I didn't even have to think about. There you go. Now, let's go through the rest of the schedule here. You start off on the road at Texas A&M. Now, to me, this is a do-or-die game for Notre Dame, in my opinion. And I've done a Texas A&M version of this video already. So if you're a Notre Dame fan and you're watching this video and you've seen my Texas A&M video, then you already know I've got you beating Texas A&M. So I just go ahead and get that part out of the way. I think Notre Dame goes on the road and beats Texas A&M. But here's why I think this is the most important game of the year for Notre Dame. There's going to be a lot of discussion at the end of the year about how many SEC and Big Ten teams should be getting into the playoffs, okay? You don't play a Big Ten team, do you? Well, you play Southern Cal. Is that it? Purdue? Anyway, if Notre Dame loses to Texas A&M, again, my opinion, I think Texas A&M is about the 7th, 8th, 9th best team in the SEC. I don't think they're going to be very good this year. They got a brand new coaching staff. They lost a ton of talent through the transfer portal. And even though I like Mike Elko, and I think he will have success at Texas A&M, I don't think it'll be this year. If Notre Dame gets to the end of the year and they're sitting there at 10-2 or 11-1, and one of those losses is to Texas A&M, and they're the 8th or 9th best team in the SEC, how do you put Notre Dame into the playoffs over any of those other SEC teams that were clearly better than Texas A&M? The weird part is Texas A&M is favored by about 1.5 in this game. I don't understand that at all. I think Notre Dame should go down there and dog walk them. I know Texas A&M can be a difficult place to play. It holds a bunch of people, and there'll be a bunch of, 18-year-olds dressed up like G.I. Joe with crew cuts and fake military uniforms that are 2 sizes too small, twirling wooden guns and doing chants that are led by male cheerleaders. I get all that, but set all that aside, the actual football team's just not very good. They haven't been very good in a long time. That's why they paid a coach $80 million to not coach there anymore. Notre Dame cannot lose this game. They're going to lose credibility if they do. By me and by anybody else with a brain. If Notre Dame goes down there and loses this game, I don't want to hear shit from the Notre Dame fans for the rest of the year. This is a pitiful schedule where you only play 8 Power 4 opponents, 2 service academies, Northern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, Navy, Army. You better go down there and handle business. I picked Notre Dame to win. Maybe Vegas knows something I don't know. I don't know why this is only a 1 or a 2 point line in this game. To me, Notre Dame is at least a touchdown better than Texas A&M. I don't get it. I've got Notre Dame winning the game, but I'm here to tell you, if you go down there and lose this game week 1, don't come over to my channel because you're not going to like what you hear or see. And I'm just putting that out there now, but I'm giving you the win. You beat Northern Illinois on the road at Purdue. Easy win. They're just a horrific team. After losing Jeff Brom to Louisville, what a turnaround down there. Talk more about Louisville in a minute. Win over Miami of Ohio, and then you play Louisville at home. Louisville beat you last year in a great game in Louisville. I think they beat you again. I really like what Brom is doing there at Louisville. He's brought in a lot of big pieces through the portal. He proved last year that he's the real deal as a coach. I doubted him at Purdue because it was just too inconsistent there. He proved me wrong last year, and I can't be on the wrong side of that argument 2 years in a row. I'm going to have to be a believer this year and be proven wrong rather than the other way around. I think Notre Dame catches its first loss at home against Louisville, although Notre Dame can win this game. I'm not here to tell you that Louisville is a mile better than Notre Dame. Here's the thing. Saying, well, Notre Dame's better than Louisville, that's not telling me anything. The better team just doesn't always win. It's that simple. It's the hardest thing for some reason for people to understand in the comments. But the argument that, well, how are they going to lose to that team? They're better than that team. It happens all the time. Do you really think that Marshall was better than Notre Dame in 2022? No. Stanford wasn't better than Notre Dame in 2022. But somehow Notre Dame lost both those games. It's just weird things happen in college football sometimes. And I think if you want to chalk that up to, or this up to that, that's fine. I think you catch your first loss against Louisville. Come out of that first bye week. You get 2 bye weeks this year. That's your first one. At home against Stanford should be an easy win. Nothing like 2022. Hopefully, Stanford's a horrific team. This should be a relatively easy win for Notre Dame. On the road at Georgia Tech. One of the phrases I say almost all the time, I sort of kind of just said it a minute ago talking about the best team doesn't always win thing, is almost every single team in the country every year loses at least one game they're not supposed to lose and wins at least one game they're not supposed to win, right? I think this is the game that Georgia Tech wins that they're not supposed to win. As much as it pains me, I do think Brent Key has Georgia Tech headed in the right direction. Now, that doesn't mean that I think they're winning 10 games or contending for the playoffs or the ACC title or anything like that. They're still a long way away from that. But when I look at Georgia Tech right now and the enthusiasm and the excitement that they have around that program under Brent Key, the improvements that they made last year, the additions they made in the offseason, and what they could look like this year, it does look like, excuse me, sorry. It does look like a team to me that could pull off a big upset somewhere along the way. And then you look at the end of the season and they're a 6-6 team or a 7-5 team. And you're like, how the hell did they beat whatever team? And again, unless you just started watching college football yesterday, you've seen things like this happen every single season. Obviously, I could be wrong. Look, it's one thing to throw a schedule up on the screen, study a team's roster and recruiting classes and coaching and all that stuff, and look at the schedule and go, looks like probably 10-2. That's one thing. But then to go through the schedule and pinpoint the exact 2 games you think they're going to lose, that is something entirely different. It's very hard to do, extremely hard to do. I've got you losing to Louisville and now losing on the road at Georgia Tech. I already said I think you beat Navy, I think you beat Virginia, and I think you beat Army. That leaves FSU and Southern Cal. I'm down on FSU. I don't think they have the talent. I don't even think they have anywhere near the talent to replace what they lost last year. You can't even put into words how big of a downgrade DJ Ugabadoogie is from Jordan Travis. They don't have a running back that can replace Trey Benson. They don't have a defensive player anywhere near as good as Jared Verse. They don't have any 2 wide receivers as good as Wilson and the guy they brought down from Michigan State. I'm drawing a blank on his name now. They don't have it. They don't have any of that. They are taking a step back. All that combined with the fact that instead of preparing for 2024, Florida State as a school, Florida State as an athletic department, Florida State as an administration, coaching staff, players, and fans, instead of preparing for 2024, that entire list of people I just named have done nothing but cry about the end of 2023. I don't think it's going to be a good year for Florida State. I think Notre Dame at home beats Florida State. I also think you beat Southern Cal on the road. I think it's going to be a rough year for Southern Cal, first year in the Big Ten. I'm not going to turn this into a bash Lincoln Riley thing and tell you how soft he is, which he is. He's going to get beat up in the Big Ten week in and week out. I'm not even talking about losing games. I'm talking about just physically beat up. It's a finesse team. Southern Cal. He's a finesse coach. He has a finesse philosophy. You can tell me till you're blue in the face about these new defensive coaches he brought in. I've heard all this before. Until I see Southern Cal put a physically dominant team on the field that knows how to play defense, I don't believe they're going to do it. Could this be the year they finally do it after 8 years of Lincoln Riley pretending he doesn't even know what defense is? Could be, but I got to see it to believe it. But after going through the gauntlet of a Big Ten schedule, I just think it's going to be a beat-up team at the end of the year, and I think Notre Dame gets that win. So I think you end up 10-2 with losses to Louisville and on the road at Georgia Tech. Now, again, you can tell me I hate Notre Dame. You can tell me I'm an idiot. You can tell me I don't know anything about Notre Dame. All that is fine. All that's fine. If you want to bury your head in the sand and pretend those things are true, what? I love Georgia Tech. Is that what it is? Yeah, I just love Georgia Tech. That's why I've gotten beating. I could be wrong. Of course I could be wrong. You could go 100-0 and win the World Cup. Hell, you've been telling me you're going to do that every offseason for 30 years. Maybe this is the year you actually do it. I don't know. Or you could go 10-2, beat Georgia Tech, beat Louisville, and lose to Southern Cal and Florida State. Look, this is just one idiot's on the internet's prediction, okay? I think Notre Dame is a really good team. I think you got one of the best defenses in all of college football. I've got what I think are legitimate concerns about the healthier quarterback, Riley Leonard, coming off of an ankle injury from last year, and questions about an unproven offensive line that's replacing 3 starters. So we'll see. That's it. I think Notre Dame is a top 10. I've got Notre Dame in my preseason top 10, okay? I think Notre Dame is a really good team. I think they're a borderline playoff team. 10-2, they might get in. I wouldn't put them in at 10-2. And to me, it doesn't matter which 2 games they lose. If they only have 6 Power 4 wins at the end of the season, I'm not putting Notre Dame in the playoffs. I'm not doing it. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not doing it. If they're 11-1, I'm putting them in, period. I don't even need to discuss it or debate it. I might need to figure out where I slot them in the seeding. But if they're 11-1, I'm putting them in without question. And this team is capable of going 11-1. This team is capable of going 12-0. If Riley Leonard is a home run and can stay healthy and the offensive line comes together, there's not a game on this schedule that I look at and I go, there's no way Notre Dame's winning that. I don't see a game on here where I look at it and say, nope, no way Notre Dame wins. Of course, Notre Dame could beat Louisville. Of course, Notre Dame could beat Georgia Tech. Now, they could also lose to Florida State and Southern Cal and Texas A&M, and I've got you winning all those. I think Notre Dame goes 10-2, and it'll be a hell of an argument first weekend in December about whether or not that 10-2 Notre Dame team should be one of the 12 playoff teams. All right, I appreciate you watching. Be sure and let me know down below how stupid I am, and have a good morning.